Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Anna Milevskaya. I'm a Senior Director of Product Marketing here at Elastic Path. Welcome to our webinar, B2B E-commerce Roadmap, Getting Your B2B Website Up and Running. This is the first webinar in a series that is designed to help B2B practitioners in the early stages of planning their website development project. Before we get started, I want to go through a few housekeeping items. You're all entering this webinar muted. So if you have a question, please submit it using Q&A option on the control panel at the bottom of your screen. And feel free to ask questions at any time during the webinar. We'll address as many as possible at the end of the presentation. We have a lot to cover today, so let's get on with today's topic. First off, I'm really excited to introduce our special guest speaker today, Carla Gonzalez. Carla is an e-commerce business manager at Wurth, Lewis & Company, and she's been in development and marketing for over 20 years. Pretty much a veteran who's been there and done it all. And if you look at Carla's background and experience, you could tell that she's done a number of successful B2B and B2C websites. I truly believe that her success and secret sauce in her truly diverse background, pretty much pulling on her experience in web design, development, marketing, data science, and bringing it all together. Welcome, Carla. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. This is a great topic to talk about today. I'm hoping that this webinar just gives everyone a good insight into and helping them answer their questions on how to plan and execute and build their B2B website.
Carla, many B2B e-commerce practitioners have experienced this or will encounter this situation where their boss comes into their office and says, we need a new website. What do they do? How do they even begin? So I really appreciate you taking the time to go over some of the B2B challenges you're seeing today. How would someone go about establishing a plan, taking an action, figuring out next steps, and really feeling that they have a very strong footing and a foundation to build from. So thank you. Let's start by talking about your company. Tell me a little bit about Wurth.
Oh, great. Wurth has been around since 1995. We were bought out and brought into the Wurth Group family in 1997. We've been, we're a woodworking supplier to wood cabinetry, carpenters in the woodworking industry, mostly on the West Coast area. We have over 20 locations and we service products such as Bloom, Grass, Formica, and Reverchef.
Fantastic. So what do you see happening in B2B industry today?
Oh, B2B is changing so much right now. It's just a rapid growth, which is such an exciting thing right now. It's no surprise that Amazon is jumping into this arena and really trying to hit it hard with their Amazon business. So those are the things that suppliers really need to be aware of, that they're trying to really come in and capture those underserved markets. The buyer and seller communication is changing. Most traditional attitudes towards the buyer is that they want to come in, they want to buy, they don't have the time to fool around on a website like they would do on their personal time, that they just want to come in and place their order or reorder and then leave. And those attitudes are changing, especially with millennials hitting the workforce. They want more interaction. People are working differently nowadays. They're doing work vacations, their mobile devices, working from home. So most of those things affect buyers' attitudes towards wanting different devices 24/7 anywhere. So B2B companies really need to change their attitude about how they really talk and communicate with their customers, and start to have that conversation about how to bring on or change their new website channel.
Right. So when someone comes into a B2B practitioner's office and says, we need a new website, what advice would you give them? It can be intimidating experience.
Yes. And I've had that happen with me before. My first suggestion is to really don't panic and manage expectations. You will have to build a project that will encompass so many aspects, so many people, so many changes in the company. And it's right off the bat to really manage expectations. You want to plan your website. You want to decide what to build. You want to gather those internal people, and you want to start learning about your business, because those are the things that are going to help you really understand what you can and can't build, how you're going to build your site, how complex it's going to be. And you really want to start off by making sure you have those conversations with your manager and stakeholders about how and what they want to do. My suggestion is to start with a plan. Talk to your boss and leadership and key people in the company about what kind of website do they want to achieve. Is this going to be complex? Do we just need it for a simple launch of a new product? Are we just trying to get into the B2B field and beat off our competition or Amazon? You need to know, because that's going to be where you're going to start. If you find that you need a huge website, you may need to bring in additional resources. You may need to put some of your other existing projects to the side. So how involved do you need to be with planning, development? Do you need to get some training in new technology or the platform that you possibly may decide to use? Those are the things that need to be considered, especially when you get into wanting to write the requirements and framework, feasibility and discovery requirements. So definitely start with a plan. Any website you're going to build, you need to start with an initial timeline. That timeline doesn't have to be intensive. It could just be a loose little key point bulletin, but you need to start with an initial timeline, and you don't keep it secret. You want to make it transparent to your bosses and stakeholders and people in the organization of just how long and intensive this project can be. Oftentimes, a project like this can take up to 2 years, depending upon how involved or how complex your requirements get. Some projects can be really as simple as 6 months, where you're just basically doing a simple interface and you're doing some offline management with the data. So you can quickly rub up a website fairly quickly, or it could be very complex and take quite a bit of time to really get started. So you want to make sure you start off with just a roadmap of where you want to be, what the time frame is, so that you can keep the momentum going, you can get buy-in, you can kind of plan what you want to do. Pre-plan. You really, part of this planning process is to pre-plan. You want to figure out how much time you're going to allot for the research, planning, feasibility. Determine if there's a big event that needs to happen. A lot of times you'll get caught off guard in the middle of your development process and someone says, hey, we need to showcase the website for the next trade show. Is it going to be ready? Or, hey, we need to get something to the stakeholders and at the management meeting, and we need to have something to demo. And you're like, we just started. We're not there yet. And so you want to get those milestones in. You want to manage those expectations and make sure you allot for those times that maybe you may want to have a quick early demo, or you may want to have mock-ups ready to kind of prove your concept. So pre-plan and set up your discovery and requirements, because those are going to take the longest to get done. You may have time with your website. This may be something that is not really ready for anything else. But when you do have a lot of time, you want to make sure you set those target dates and set up some tangible progress reports with your organization. Project planning. This is where the development happens, and this is where it's a quiet time, because you're not really running around. Your developers have all the information they need. They're starting to code. It could take 3 to 6 months during this period to get your website developed and coded in the platform you want to. So you may not have that much actual interaction with your team because they're busy doing the work. So you may want to set up small sprints with them, maybe work with setting some milestones. A lot of times during this time, you're going to get your team, your management, they're going to want to know what's going on. And a lot of times early in the stages of coding, they don't understand the technical aspects of the website yet. There may be holes, there may be not a lot of content in, so they don't see the finished product. So you may want to wait during this time to not show it to any internal people that really aren't technical until you're about 85% done with your website. Then they can get a better concept. They don't get confused as to what's still being developed and what's done. You want to use your wireframes, your prototypes to kind of get them excited and answer questions, but you really want to keep things at the development level at this time. Continuously plan. Scope creep happens a lot. And so before you launch the site or after development, you want to make sure those things that you have ideas for, or you hear ideas about, that they can go into plan B. Because as soon as you get the site more into a tangible view, someone's going to say, oh, can we add this? Can we add that? You're going to be like, oh, that's a great idea. Or you want to do that. And sometimes you're your own biggest scope creeper. So you want to make sure you have in your plan time to put those projects into plan B or into continuous maintenance. You want to work with your IT people to make sure that before you launch the site, that there's servers and setups in place to make sure that there's no alarms or monitoring. Because even when you launch the site, there can always be a situation where the site crashes, or you may have to back it out because there's an error or a bug in the order process, or the codes are coming out a little bit. And so you're going to expect those kinds of hiccups. So you want to make sure that if something happens, or when customers get on the website and they experience some problems, that there's alerts that happen. So you want to make sure you work with IT on those kinds of things. Set up beta testing. Make sure you, before you launch it to your primary domain, have it on a staging domain. Let customers play around with the site without fear of public or Google tagging your site in the beta phase. And then that way you can kind of figure out what's going on. You always want to work through your content. So through this time, even continuously, you can be setting up, tweaking, and making sure that your content is ready to go through the site.
So Carla, you know what you want to do. You have a plan, you have the requirements. How do you figure out how much money do you need?
That's a big question. A website could cost anywhere between $200,000 to $1 million plus, depending upon the platform, the complexity, the time it's going to take. So there's outside additional costs that happen, developer costs, levels of development cost. So a website can be as expensive or as inexpensive as you need it to be. Things you may need to consider in your budget is you may want to share your costs with marketing or purchasing or other areas of the site. So it doesn't always fall on your department budget. And that's important because sometimes when you work with accounting and finances, some of those allocations help the business. So work with your boss, work with your finance department leadership to figure out exactly how the website's going to be funded. You don't want to get started down a road and realize there's no money for it, or it may be a startup project, or then there may be a lot of money in the beginning, but because this project is going to be bigger, it may roll over multiple yearly budgets, and so it may get cut off. So you want to allocate and set aside an additional spend, an initial spend of what you think it might cost, so that later down when you start to ask for the contracts to be signed and for the resources to be spent, the money is still there for you. Keep track of your cost and spending, because those are the things that finance is going to want to know. They're going to maybe want to put it in a CapEx, or they may want to defer the cost. So separate any true development project costs from any maintenance or support projects that could be billed separately. You may have to visit vendors, or vendors may have to come to you, and vendors do charge you to come out if they need to consult on some stuff. You may have to split the cost on travel or additional expenses. So factor those too in your budget. Determining a website is probably going to be your foundation. And this is where you really need to manage expectations and talk to your boss and your organization as to what do they want to build. A simple transactional website is a website that really is limited. We just want something to take orders, process orders, take some stress off the customer service desk. And that's a very simple e-commerce website. But more of a business unit, more a complex, dynamic website that really dials into customers' needs, lets them use it as their own internal system, maybe has multiple users. It's more, it brings in some of the offline services. That's a little bit more of a complex website, and that requires more time, more money, more resources. And so you really want to get an idea from your boss and stakeholders and organizations in your company to say, what are we really building today? Because you may be going down the simple road and they're thinking complex, or vice versa.
So Carla, you know the plan, you know the road you want to go down, you more or less figured out your budget, got stakeholders understanding what the plan is. What else is needed for a successful project?
Resources, internal committee. You really want to gather your allies and internal troops. You can't build a website by yourself. And if you don't have support inside your organization, your website's going to have a lot of problems. People are not going to want to talk to you. You're not going to be able to get them to help you stumble through some of the requirement roadblocks, changing some of the business rules. So you want to be able to have on your team those key people in different departments. You want the leadership champion. You want somebody at the, if it's your boss, if he's the president, or if he's a senior executive, you want that person to be your champion in those leadership meetings where you're not maybe able to attend, or you're not a part of that committee. You want to be able to have somebody be your advocate. That way that anything that's happening with the website, you are getting someone to funnel that for you, especially when it comes to budget and time frame. You want to maybe find some external supporters. Elicit as many key people in the organization as possible. Finance, marketing, sales, customer service. Those people should be what you can consider your internal committee. And you meet with them regularly and get their support right up front. And most of the time, people, when they're building an initiative this big, they are really excited about it. It's going to answer a lot of their questions. They need the support as well. So everyone really kind of somewhat rallies around the website because they want this new channel anyway. You may get some resistance because people are busy or they may have anything. And that's where that leadership person can come in and pave the way and say, no, this is going to be an organizational priority. And then people will kind of gather. Have regular meetings once a month. When you get closer, maybe once a week, maybe daily when it's closer to launch. Those people in the committee will be the ones that will help you define your requirements. They'll be your early testers. They'll be the ones that interpret the business rules. Find people outside of your industry. I know that this website may be proprietary. There may be some, special secrets and things that you may not want to share with outsiders, but you can talk technology, you can talk referrals, you can talk to people in the industry, your peers, that can give you insights, maybe give you hidden services that you may need to consider. I know when I talked to someone else about a project I was working on, she said, hey, do you know that the vendors offer these kinds of specials if you have these types of problems? And I found that I was able to save some money. I was also able to get some services that I didn't know existed. So sometimes talking out your project in a global sense can help you find resources that you really didn't know were out there. Post questions on discussion boards if you have a problem, because later down the line, when you're really running into a bottleneck or there's a functionality problem that you have with the platform, you have now your resources that you can go to and say, hey, I'm having this problem. Is there something that you have similar that I can maybe figure out how to solve my problem? So you want to start with having some of those external supporters. A lot of vendors have customer success teams, people who they set aside to really work with you on your products and your projects. So you may need to get some help with the vendor. So find out if they have those kinds of services. When you're ready to start your website, and once you get the call to say, hey, we need a website, the first thing you really need to do is gather your background. Understand what's going on in your company. You might have been there for a long, long time. You may just start. And if you're but you're not dialed into a lot of the different things that are happening in the website because you're kind of hyper focused on the e-commerce side. But you want to now step back and say, I'm going to be that investigator and really get the background knowledge of my company so that I can see if those things need to be turned into a requirement or a functionality, or we may need to adjust the business rules. Learn about your customers. Take time to understand their buying habits and behaviors. Why do they buy from you? A lot of times customers classify their customers in different levels and categories. Find out about that as well, because you may be building a website to tailor to a specific segment of your customers. Maybe some of the smaller customers, maybe the larger customers may not need to be on your website because they order different ways. Maybe they already have an EDI system that kind of already brings their orders in. So you don't need to worry about those types of customers. So you want to figure out who your internal customers are and who are you going to target your website to. Find out what they're having problems with. Maybe you need to do some ride-alongs with your sales team. Maybe you need to talk to or spend some time in customer service and answering calls and hearing what's going on, because you will find out a lot that's going on with your company just by sitting and talking to those people who touch the customers all the time. Visit the warehouse. So important. You'll find exactly how your products are being shipped, inventory procedures, bottlenecks. Those things need to be translated to the web. So you want to get an idea of what's happening in your internal organization so that you can figure out if these things are going to hold you up or they need to be transferred in. Know what's going on in the industry. Check your competitors' websites. They're changing. They want to be competitive. So they're doing functions and features, and that you may need to think, oh, we may need to do that ourselves, or, oh, we could do that better, or we're thinking of things that they're not thinking of. So those are giving you the advantage. So do your homework. Look for keywords. Figure out if you're going to do some SEO or analysis later. So you want to figure out what's on those keywords. How are they writing their content headers? What's going on with search engines? Because those things will affect your development later, especially if there's major changes in browsers. Read publications. There's always good tips and things like that to help you figure out how you're going to build your website. Look at B2C. There's a lot of features because B2C customers are also your buyers. And so you want to get some of the inspiration from well-known and popular websites that have consumer functionality that could be translated into B2B functionality. Tackle data early. I can't begin to tell you where this is going to be your biggest pain and pleasure, heartache. You're going to cry a lot about data because you don't know where it's coming from. It may be, or you don't know how much you need of it. A B2B requires a lot of data, especially because we're looking at bringing in customer information, pricing, contracts, bids, special circumstances with products, special delivery methods. Lots of different data touch points are going to hit your website. So you want to tackle this early. Work with IT, work with your data miners and figure out what's going on with the data that's coming in. Can I directly add it to my website? Do I have to do some manual processes? Is it dirty? Has it ever been touched? Because some of the data that you're working with may have been since the company started, and now you have to kind of clean that up in order for it to work on the website. So content data and internal data is a little different, because content data, you may need to get a PIM, which is additional system. Internal data, you may need to have some EDIs that come through or manual nightly uploads that come through. So having a separate and an independent conversation and tackling that data early will save you a lot of time during development, and it will delay your project. Add value to your website. If you're really even if it's just a transactional website, you want to be able to offer some of the logistics that are happening in the website to make the customer have a better experience. You may want to bring in your catalog, even if it's just referencing the catalog number, so that they can easily order because they have the catalog on their desk. They can go to the website and put in the catalog number, and then they can find the product simply. Or they may want to have some management account management services. It doesn't have to be extremely complex, but just some of the features that you have offline, bringing them online just can add so much value to your website. A lot of things that are happening now in the industry is personalization. Everyone wants to be catered to, have that information that is exclusive to me. Find ways to incorporate personalization into your website. It could be just as simple as a personalized navigation bar that gives a customer their information when they log in, or a product recommendation that brings in the products that they're most frequently purchase. Maybe customized landing pages to what they feel is comfortable for their working habits. Those things go a long way and they help with conversions. In a B2B website, you want more time on site, not where a consumer can spend hours on your site. But if they're spending regular times, they're coming back to your site, they're spending additional money on your site, because they may have a contract to buy 4 or 5 specific items, but as you introduce new items and they're using the personalized services, they may decide to order additional products. So these extra added values can also bring in additional conversion opportunities.
So Carla, once you know what's going on in your business and you know what you want for your website, how much money you need, how do you actually go about selecting the right technology platform and the right development partner to bring your vision to life?
Great question. Your foundation is going to be the biggest challenge in the beginning of your website. Choose wisely. Diving into the platform and finding that development partner is going to be so important to how your website is going to function and progress throughout the life of your tenure there or beyond. It's not easy to rip and replace a website just because you chose the wrong partner or you chose the wrong development person. And a lot of times that's where bottlenecks is. If you can't communicate with your partners and your organization, you may find that this website can't get off the ground. So determining what team you need and what the right fit is going to be really important. You may want to consider going headless. Choosing a partner is something that you are going to have to look at different aspects that are important. Open source versus licensed platform. Open source is free. It's great on your budget, but it's development heavy, because most open sources rely on developers to add code to the repository of that platform. It keeps it alive. Whereas on a licensed platform, they have a team of constant developers that are bringing new technology and new features into that platform. So that's what you're paying for. You're paying for the upfront support and the development build out of a licensed platform. So there are a bit pluses and minuses with both sides, but you have to figure out how much resources you have in order to figure out if it's worth going through a development heavy web platform or a prepackaged support-based platform. Find out if the platform is truly B2B. There are a lot of platforms that have B2B features, but they're probably based in a B2C platform. It's not bad, because you may later down the line say, we have prospects that haven't signed up for our contract or signed up for our account yet. So maybe we want to treat them as a B2C and maybe get some initial revenue or teasers before they actually sign into a contract. So some of the B2C features, like payout by guest, things that you really don't think about in the B2B world, could play a benefit. But then again, you may decide that we don't need those. So you need to decide if you want a true B2B platform that really doesn't have too many cater functions that are B2C, or do you want a B2B or B2B, B2C kind of hybrid platform? Does the platform integrate with your internal systems? You're going to be dealing with data, your internal data, heavy connections back and forth. Does this platform play well with integrations, web services? Do I have to buy an additional app, or do I have to buy an additional subscription to integrate with other third-party applications in order for me to be able to get the data or information I need from our internal systems? Choose a platform will also decide if you want to do with a robust platform or the platform is not robust enough. Every feature out there is not always the best, because if you choose not to use it, or there's customized features that you need to add to it. It adds more complexity to your website. Plus, a heavy platform means you have to suppress some of those features that you don't need. And that's just a lot of code heavy work that you don't need to deal with. Find those key features that really are important to you. Maybe it's the pricing, maybe it's the shipping fulfillment functionality, or it may be how they handle customers. Figure out those really important features that work for what you need and look for platforms for that. And if it has extra features, those are benefits and you can grow into those. But if you try to get everything out the box, you might find that that's going to backfire later down the line. So you want a platform that's big enough to grow, but not too big to where you're swimming in a bunch of functionalities that you really don't need. Find out if the platform has support. Every platform should have at least free information to install it, run it, be able to do some basic customization in it. If you have a program that you can't find information about, or you can't figure out to use it, that's probably not a platform for you. It's probably a platform for more developers and coders who like to fish and play around with the code to do more customization. And if you can't manage the site after it's launched, it's going to be even harder. So you want to make sure there's significant amount of information about how to use the website that you as the user for the website and you as the person helping to build the website can communicate and use. Want a platform that really is able to not always be a standalone, but you don't want a platform that needs a lot of heavy additional platforms to connect to it. It has a module for the customers. It has a module for this. And now you're dealing with, you have a platform with all these external modules. In some cases you need that, in some cases you don't. So you want to figure out if there's other applications that need to be added to your platform in order for it to work. You want to also consider that your hosting and server architecture is, how does that play well with the platform? Some may need additional service. You may not be able to use it on the cloud. You may have to use it on-prem. So does it support that? And especially platforms operate differently in the cloud versus on-prem. You may need to have a lot of servers, or some you may only need a few servers. So having to figure out how your server architecture is going to work and how any additional applications work with your platform will make a decision as to what, if this platform is right for you. Some other things to really consider is to compare your platforms with other platforms that you're seeing. Put a scorecard together, side-by-side features. Figure out which features work better for you. If you're dealing with open source, how much coding do you have? What's the documentation? Read over those key points that happen. Bring in a demo. Try it before you buy it. Try to avoid end-of-life platforms. There are platforms that are not being supported anymore, and they're pretty outdated because there's a new platform coming out, or there's a new, if it's open source, people aren't contributing to it anymore. So you don't want to get a platform that's about to die and then you have to spend more time trying to keep the code alive. Or you don't want a platform that's so early in the startup that you're now the guinea pig, and the things that you're doing or your developers doing, you have to be the ones to test it and find the bugs and figure it out. So you're spending more time helping build the platform than build your website. You want to make sure that you build a relationship with the partners that you're going to deal with, especially your platform provider. Find out if they have a customer service team. Talk to their internal developers. Figure out how complex or how easy it is to get support for the platform if you run into problems, especially if you're going to do some customization and integrations with your systems. You want to make sure that if you run into a bottleneck, there's support with the application and you don't have to, may have to pay for it, you may not have to pay for it, but how much is involved. And so that's a key factor in deciding.
So Carla, often during a platform selection process, headless commerce comes up and it's top of mind for many B2B commerce professionals. I know you went through a selection process. Why would someone go headless? When is the right time? What would be your perspective?
Headless requires a lot more complexity. It is really a decoupling of your system. It is a front end and a back end. And then there's a middleware in the middle where you're dealing with the communication between both. And so in some cases, You may want to have multiple, what they call heads or front end presences, maybe banners, a mobile app, some other technology that you're working with, pricing, promotional features that need to be based on the website. And so if you're starting to think about other extended front end opportunities, Headless works. If you're thinking about just one, even if it's just mobile, hey, we want to do a mobile app for our sales rep, you may want to save yourself the headache of trying to or decouple an existing storefront platform or a traditional website platform, and think about vendors who have that flexibility of headless platform. It has a lot of benefits of helping to bring data together. You can do more machine learning with it because now you're dealing with just an independent backend and a dynamic front end. You want to find out if headless works because it has a budgetary expense, it has developers expense, because you're looking at having a front-end developer as well as a back-end developer. And in some cases, you've now doubled your resources on your development. It could be beneficial in the beginning because later down the line, you've already got the infrastructure set up. So all you have to do is put up a different new front end or a different website storefront, and that could be a low cost. So headless may be a little bit expensive in the beginning, but it's much more flexible, gives you a lot more freedom. So my recommendation is if you're deciding to do at least one other digital front-end presence, you may want to start thinking about doing something in the headless world. Choosing a development partner, this will be probably the most or the second most important decision you make early on, because the platform you choose will need to have someone who can build into it. Even if it's just a consultant or your in-house technical team can do it. And your in-house technical team is also your development partners. And your platform service provider could also be the person to build your website. So you want to make sure that when you pick your platform, you're also looking at who's going to help you build it. And so you want to make sure that they're comfortable with the platform, they've built in it. There are a lot of developers that may know Java, they may be PHP developers, they may be front-end design developers, but they don't know the specific platform. And that means that if you choose to do with those developers, even in-house, you may need to train them or get them up to speed to know the specifics on how to build in that platform. So you want to keep that in mind, that if you have a platform that you're considering, can your developers work and support in that? And do they have support with that platform? Because if they're building in it regularly and continuously, they have relationships with the platform service provider, and they can actually handle bottleneck problems and questions where you're not having to sift through or call your representative to ask questions for them. So you really want a developer or development company that's comfortable with the platform. You want to look at deciding if you want to deal with a development house or an agency. An agency has a lot of support services, front-end user experience professionals, they have SEO professionals, they have design consultants, and things like that that really help add benefits to your website. But those are extra side services. And they also are services that are not directly related to building and developing the code. A development house is usually a smaller group of developers, strong in what they're doing. They don't have those extra side support services, those things that they may consult out with to actually add to their development house. But it's a different approach, because sometimes when you're dealing with development houses, you may need to be more technically involved. And in an agency, they have different project managers, leaderships, engineers that really kind of handle it. So you're really just handing off your website to a certain extent with that agency, and they're kind of coming to you with information that you need to provide them, and you're not so much hands-on. Should you use US developers versus overseas developers? There's a really big difference when you're using US developers. The cost is a little bit higher because US prices, but you also have a different relationship and a different rapport with the US. You can go and see them and see if there's a bottleneck. You may not be able to fly over to India or China really as quickly as you can. The cultural differences in communication is different. Time zones are different. You may have to jump on a call in the middle of the night because there's a problem with the website, where you can do different things with the US developers. Maybe you guys can all have a visit at the office and then handle that problem differently. So you need to decide if US developers may be the better way to go. And then again, you may be able to say, we have the infrastructure, or we may have an offshore facility that I can go and work with for a temporary time while I'm building the website. So it may work for you to use offshore developers, and the cost is a little bit less. You want to make sure that you talk to everyone on your team. You may talk to the owner of the development company. You may talk to the lead project manager, but that lead project manager may not be the person that's actually working on your site. You want to make sure you're talking to your team at all phases of the project. You want to be able to say, hey, let's all get on a call. Let's resolve that problem, because developers have a different perspective on the project, and you're talking to the coder who's actually going to make the change, as opposed to the project manager who's got to relay that question back to the developer. So you want to be able to make sure you have that that open rapport and flexibility and ability to talk to the developers. Some companies don't like you to have that much interaction because it's distracting to the developers. But in some cases, developers want that. So you need to figure out a balance of how much involvement you want to be able to talk to your team and make sure that they're getting things done and milestones are being happen. Look at their previous work. You want to see live demos. If they have demos that in your platform that are 5 or 6 years ago, then they may not be coding in the most recent platform. So you want to see multiple references. Call some of their, if they're comfortable with you calling some of their past clients, and usually they'll give you, they're mostly eager to have you talk to them because they want to make sure that you're comfortable and you know experience that they've had with the other customers was just as great. So talk to the referrals. Don't just say, okay, I need the referral, and don't call it. You really find that sometimes doing that early due diligence of finding out what happened with that other company's project with those developers, maybe things that you have not even considered being able to ask, or you might have not thought, hey, we need to add that to our project. So you want to get as much reference and understanding of the partner that you're going to be working with, because those are the people that are going to be with you for quite some time. They're going to be the ones that maintaining the site after it's up. So you want to make sure you have a good relationship.
Carla, this was a lot of valuable insights. What are some of the nuggets of wisdom you would like our audience to walk away with?
Keep in mind your B2B challenges. Definitely keep the buyer and seller interaction in mind when you're building your website, because those are the things that are going to influence changes. Or your boss can come in and say, hey, we just saw an article that Amazon's doing something with B2B. Can we do that too? So these, keep in your mind on the focus of what's going on in B2B world can spearhead some of those conversations you have. And it kind of helps with scope creep. You don't want your boss coming in here saying, hey, we want to do this, and hey, we want to do this because we read about this or we heard about this, and you want to make sure you're on top of those kinds of things. Plan your website. It is so important to have a plan in mind so that you can manage expectations. You know what's going to happen throughout the life of your project, especially if it goes for longer than 6 or 7 months. You're going to need to reiterate to your boss, we're still in development mode, or we're still in planning mode, because everyone's going to be really excited to get the website up and going. So you want to make sure you have an opportunity to plan it and manage expectation. Get that internal team started. Get your boss to say, hey, we need everybody on board with this. Let's make the website a priority, because if it's on the back burner, you may not get as much approvals. You may not get your requirements changed. You may have to change processes, and they may take time. So you want to make sure you have all those things in your planning book, and create a checklist or create a playbook so those ideas are written down. Choose wisely. You definitely want to make sure the platform you pick is the platform you're going to live with, because you may not be able to change it, and you don't want to be in the middle of your platform going, wow, we just picked the wrong platform and now we have to reallocate budget. You may not have that. So you have to live with it. And now you've got a platform that you're not happy with. You want to make sure your developers, you don't want to have constant frustrations with asking them or getting them on the phone, or why are they building it this way? I don't understand. Ask questions. If you're not technically inclined, you want to make sure that the developers that you use are sensitive to the fact that you may not know the technical buzzwords, or you may not know how to extrapolate information from your internal teams. How involved are they going to do to help you get the information they need to code properly? So you want to make sure that the people you work with in the development on your platform has the expertise, and that they can work with you on a daily basis, because that's going to be who is going to make your website successful.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you so much, Carla. I would like to open up this webinar to questions, and it looks like we have one already. Carla, I'm going to read this to you. One of your phases is requirements gathering. How do you typically see development projects take phase using a sprint methodology, waterfall methodology, combination of the two, or something else?
It's a bit of a combination of a lot of things. Sometimes I start off with waterfall. Because it's just succinctly, you're setting a requirement. Sometimes you go into some Azure, or you go into maybe a cyclical. There's lots of different methodologies you can pick. Sometimes the developers have their own methodologies that they use. So you may need to incorporate some of what they're doing, and you'll work with them on how they sprint projects in to your development. In the requirements phase, I typically deal with the waterfall method, because I need to gather my thoughts and processes succinctly. I want to make sure that I'm not overtaxing or overwhelming some of the internal people, because they're not technically inclined. So you don't want them to feel as if this project is just so overwhelming and I can't help you because I don't know what you want. So you really want to take it slowly in the beginning with your stakeholders or your committee. And so sometimes waterfall works.
Great, thank you. I'd love to invite our audience to submit other questions. And in the meantime, Carla, I have one of my own. Okay. You mentioned that scope creep can really derail the project. Could you tell me a little bit more about your experience here?
Scope creep is probably going to be your biggest enemy in development. And it's also going to be something that's going to help you keep your project on track, because when you start getting these distractions, and believe me, you could be your own biggest worst enemy, you could be the scope creeper of your own project. Make sure that you write out all the functionalities. When you start diving into your requirements, you may decide to scope out a project one way. When the developers get it, they're going to add their information and understanding of how it actually is going to be built. So you're going to change your requirements. So your requirements are fluid, but there's going to be those little changes that are now going to completely be out of scope. There's things that need to be changed. There's things that's going to be scope driven. So plan for when you have these kinds of I guess, epiphanies, when the development comes around that says, hey, it can't be built this way, or hey, we forgot to add this to it. Is it a true phase one project, or can we move that functionality to phase two? And that's where you're going to manage your scope creep. If you can look at it and say, we can build this later and keep going, then it's really a scope creep. If you need to incorporate it because it's a vital function that needs to change, go ahead and change it and work with your developers. Make sure that when you're dealing with developers and talking to them or setting up your relationships with them, that they don't charge you for every time you make a change, because change costs. And so if you're in the middle of a project and you have to rethink it, you don't want to say, oh my God, I have to now be rebudgeted. So you want to pad in some for scope creep. You want to pad in for changes. They're a little bit different. So my rule of thumb is, if you can build it, if you can wait, then it's a change. It's a phase two, and it's a scope creep. If you need to fix it in order for your website to function properly or to work the way you need it to do, then it's a change, and then you need to go and incorporate it.
Got it. Carla, we have another question from the audience. Don't you think you might face some big issues if the website is not shown regularly to the stakeholders?
Not really, because that's where you start off with making sure you have some prototypes and wireframes. There's platforms like Marvel that will allow you to take the wireframes and show, pathways and things like that. So if you give your stakeholders a good, clear understanding of what the website's going to be about, they'll be comfortable with that because they want to see the finished product. When you show the website early, and I've had this mistake myself, my boss isn't very technically inclined, so he was expecting to see more finished functionality out. We didn't have the data in place, and so he felt as if it wasn't ready, or was this going to take long? So it actually backfired on me when I showed it too early, because it was still code fixes and bugs that we needed to work through, and I had to explain more, and he wasn't technically inclined. So sometimes you need to hold back a little bit with your non-technical stakeholders, because they aren't going to understand that a photograph is for placement and it's not the real photo, or this data is just Greek copy. And you'll get people that'll start to proof your site, and you're like, that's just text for placement. So spend a little bit of investment in doing wireframes, high-level wireframes that really convey your project and your ideas to stakeholders, and they'll be happy with that, because then they can go and take those and add them to presentations. They can bring them to meetings and say, hey, this is what our website's going to look like, and it'll hold off people wanting more detail or wanting to see things sooner, because they have something they can present.
Makes sense. We have another question here. How do you think a new e-commerce site should be marketed and advertised, and in what phases?
You can market and advertise your site as soon as you decide to do it, but it's in different phases. Once you get the wireframes and markups together, you can send little teasers to your customers. Internal marketing is just as important, because you want to get buy-in from your internal people, stakeholders that are going to affect your budget. Once you get closer to launching, you may want to build a committee of customers that you can test and get things together, and that's a little early marketing. When you actually want to seriously push it out to, I guess I want to say, the world, or the WWW, you really want to wait until you're really nailed down with there's no problems, you've tested it thoroughly, and then you can turn it on to your primary domain and send out invites and invitations. So you'll be doing a lot of advertising and marketing and teasers, getting people excited, getting early testers, getting people to buy in, because those early marketing things, and you can even put little coming soon teasers on sales to the sales reps, or get them talking about it, because then you'll start to get early feedback. Oh, I'm glad you're putting a website together. Do you know we've been having problems with this. I hope the website will be able to take care of that problem. So a lot of times, just giving your sales guys regular updates, advertisement, little small marketing materials that they can get their customers ready to prepare for the website, you'll get information and feedback that way. So I always say, you're going to tailor your marketing throughout the presentation, but always continue to have people talk about it, because the more excitement you have, the more people get into it, the more you'll be able to get them to jump on and start buying right away.
Great, thank you, Carla. So you mentioned some early testers. Could you talk about who those testers might be, and how, what's the best way to engage them?
I would say talk to your sales reps. They know who is more mobile savvy, who they've been talking to about a mobile presence. So you may want to elicit maybe 5 or 10 people earlier, maybe as many as 50 people later down the line. Or you may want to open it up to anybody who wants to volunteer to be a mobile tester. So you could have upwards of a couple hundred people that are going to do some beta testing. So early testers are people who are open to mistakes. They're not frustrated that they have to go through some of the rough patches in the beginning. You want to also record that by doing surveys. If you're going to get their time, you want to give get something back from them. And so maybe do a survey at the end, maybe do some Q&A with them as to what's going on, maybe visit their site and see what other competitors websites that they're using right now. So you're going to have a little bit of phases. When I started, I had 5 or 6 vendor special customers I went to see. Now we're looking at figuring out how we're going to open this up to some of our premium customers that we know are going to have the flexibility to test it. And then we may just, like I said, put it into beta for a couple of months and then selectively send out emails throughout the month to get people to slowly buy in. Because during those early times, they're registering, they're getting their data in. And if you have to bring any internal data from them, like their order history or their customer contact data from your system, or you don't have a lot of their contact information, getting people in the beta phase allows you to populate your data, clean up your data, because now they're actually using the system in a non-threatening or non-judgmental way. So it's going to vary, whatever you feel comfortable with. And sometimes your salespeople are going to be your early testers, along with your internal operations and customer service. Customer service uses the website for references. So they may be the ones to use the website as well as early testers. So have a bunch of groups of people using it at different phases.
Makes sense. I'd like to invite the audience to submit additional questions. Please feel free to do so. We have a couple more minutes till the end of the webinar. Carla, you mentioned sales team a few times. Oftentimes they are not in favor of the digital initiative. They don't want a website. They feel as though the website may replace their efforts. What's your point of view on this?
That is a big concern. I mean, when I walked into my organization, we have a strong sales team, and a lot of them are older. A lot of them are used to the hand holding with their customer. So they didn't want to let go of the web. So what we did was we really embraced getting them on the website. They're able to utilize the web themselves. They see how comfortable it is. They see how easy that their customers can communicate without them. And that frees them up to work on other customers and build their sales in other areas. So that's just revenue coming in for them, especially if they're still getting commission off the web, off of those direct customers, regardless of which channel they use. If it's the customer service call or the direct salesperson, if they own those customers and the web is just a funnel for them, then you kind of have to educate them that the web isn't replacing them. It's just an extra added tool. So they'll start to embrace it. They're using it. They're logging in on it. We in our company did some things where we want the sales guys to be able to interact. So we gave them special login pages. They have special ways to see what their customers are doing. So you may want to even incorporate some kind of special features for the sales reps so that when they interact with the website, they're getting special functions and features that allow them to do their job better. And then they're getting, the more they're comfortable with it, the more they'll promote it.
Thank you so much, Carla. This was a lot of valuable insights. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. We are at the top of our hour here. Thank you, Carla. It was a pleasure. And thank you to all of our participants for joining us today. Have a great day.
But if anybody has any questions, they're more than welcome to call me or email me, and I can answer them offline.
Thank you, Carla.